Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
Is it okay if I kick your boss's ass? That won't affect your workplace chemistry, will it?
One man's toxic sludge is another man's potpourri.
All right, who did this? I'm not mad. I just want to know who did it so I can punish them.
When I get to the workplace, I like to fuck shit up.
Welcome to Let's Break Up, Toxic Workplace Stories, where weekly we interview people from around the world reflecting on their experiences in toxic workplaces.
Sharing lessons learned and providing a safe, supportive environment to share your stories with us and everyone else that may also be experiencing a similar situation.
Hosted by me, Nicola,
and me, Gina.
Both with many years of experience in the corporate world and now deep diving into the toxic workplace culture.
Each week we will provide tips and ways to identify and overcome some of the challenges associated with toxic workplaces. So settle in and relax.
As you join us in today's episode,
let's jump straight in and see where this journey takes us.
Okay, so I think, one of the things that we're going to talk about, I think, today is, what is traditional workplace toxicity? And I know that you went and found kind of 16 signs of a toxic workplace, according to FastCompany, which actually were really valid. And I really enjoyed reading through them. So I thought it was a really good idea to maybe go through each one of them and kind of highlight how the toxic organization that we met in, how those lined up with the toxicity that is kind of commonplace in a toxic work environment. So
okay.
do you want to start at number one?
Sure. So number one is turnover, which just means, there's an obvious symptom of a toxic workplace environment when there's a lot of turnover. So people like to say, like, people don't leave their job, they leave their boss. And toxic bosses create toxic environments that drive people away. So if you're seeing a lot of turnover, you might have a toxic workplace.
You might want to reconsider.
Yeah.
But I think what was interesting about this workplace, and I know we kind of disagree a little bit on this, is because the team was so small, there wasn't ever a lack of something to do. So there was always something interesting for you to do. So the turnover of the core team was very small. Like, the turnover wasn't huge.
But you and I were part of the leadership team, and we had a lot of turnover. And then I also know a lot of content creators were let go. I was told why. I didn't know any of these people. Also gossiping, and I think one of the first things out of the CEO's mouth when she first interviewed me was, I don't think we've had anyone quit on us yet. We have fired people.
Ew!
Yeah. And the COO would confide in me, like, about who she had to let go and why. And a lot of them were just lower level people, like content creators. But it was like, I don't know these people. I don't give a shit. Please stop talking to me so I can fucking work.
But that's so gossipy. Like, it is just so negative. Like, you don't confide, like, why you're firing people.
Well, when you were fired,
process.
She called me, like, she Slack called me and was like, oh my God, I feel so much lighter. And I was like, okay. Like,
ew.
Yeah. And then she proceeded to make fun of you. She was like, oh, she wanted like an investigation, like an FBI investigation. And I was like, dude, an
investigation is like an internal investigation. Don't be a dick.
When I tell you I could have cared less, I literally, like, if I could have just like taken my entire laptop and like farted into it in response to that, I would have. I can't fart on demand though, because like, I was just like, why does she think I care? But yeah, I mean, none of the things she said to me, none of the things she said to me were appropriate when it came to other, employees. And it's very gossipy.
So gossipy. Well,
yeah.
we go into number 2, right? I think this is a big one for both of us, is
Yes.
cronyism. So while it is appropriate sometimes to go with people that you've worked with in the past, a culture of cronyism is toxic. Hiring from the same pool of friends, former colleagues, an alumni network, and bypassing high performers to promote friends and former colleagues into higher roles, showing favoritism for people that you know, it's a no-no, right? Positive cultures, not toxic cultures, positive cultures seek out diverse perspectives, fostering equitable practices and openness. This company was notorious for
Let's
this.
say it again. Notorious. It was so bad. It was so bad. Tell us why.
So bad. It was like huge. Okay, so all the staff members, other than you and I potentially, were from the same school, the same church group, family members, with little or no experience, and they were often put in these executive positions. Don't get me wrong, it's a great way to learn, like all hands on deck, let's learn a new talent. But when you have no real world experience, it's really hard for you to grow. And there was always commentary around how work is like a family, we're all friends, like we're so close, it's tight knit. And I was short-staffed at one point, and I was told I could use the boss's partner who joined my team, realistically had no experience in the space that we needed the work to be done in, had limited time available to do things. So I ended up just having to do double the work, because you can't exactly go back to your boss and say, hey, look, your partner's not pulling their weight. You know, can you imagine what the ripple effects of that would be?
But, you know, so for me, it was like, I didn't know a lot of this until towards the end of my time there, that most of these people were either direct family members, or they were all hired from a Midwestern based church group, which I really don't care. Like, I'm a New Yorker. We're very liberal. Like, we don't care what you're doing, who you're doing it with. Like, if you're not hurting anyone, go on with your bad self. But these are not my people. Like, I'm again, native New Yorker. I don't sugarcoat things. I don't, read blessings first thing in the morning. I work in a corporate environment, and I'm used to working with people who have no problem with me sending an email that doesn't have a fluffy greeting and just disseminates information. So communication was really difficult for me within my team. And I think the lack of actual qualifying experience for some people, like the COO and even the CEO, they were not business people. They did not know what they were doing. It was really frustrating for me, because like, where's the line between me saying, wait, I know better because I've done this before, like for 5 million times, or I've seen someone else do this and this is a terrible idea. But not being so engaged that I take the job like personally. It was a very difficult fine line for me. So yeah, that was a tough one for me, because once I found out that the people were all like from either family members or church group members, it clicked. A lot of it really clicked for me, because I was like, oh, I remember I would ask you, I'd be like, why do these people have the same last names? And you would be like, oh, because that's so-and-so's like brother-in-law. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, or that was so-and-so's neighbor in Arkansas when they lived there and they became friends and now they work here. And I was like, what? Yeah. Like, this is so fucking bizarre. The next point, number 3, is a structural fear of retribution. Toxicity in the workplace needs to be fixed from the company cultural point of view. If you suspect there's a problem, there probably is. Can we just say that these are Dr. Seuss, the cultural points? I feel like those are our Dr. Seuss, like, core values that we talked about. Anyway, leaders need to find time to chat with staff and not wait to be told. The organizational structure should allow open and honest communication without fear of retributions or tarnished reputations. Ask and ask often. All right.
Oh, So, okay, as you know, I've got no problem speaking my mind, and I genuinely think neither did you, but many times I was told that when I spoke my mind or shared an opinion, it wasn't soft enough or positive enough. And we're going to hit on that toxic positivity later. But, sometimes business isn't all rainbows and unicorns. And I remember one situation quite clearly. The product people wanted, that it was something that had to include plastic plants. And I just said, hey, I thought the business was about sustainability and reducing plastic waste and reducing
So much to say about that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. We don't need, that is a whole nother.
That's a whole different podcast. That's like sustainability and like supply chain and importing. But yeah, go ahead.
The core here is that we're supposed to have a limited environmental impact. And now you want to include a plastic plant? Like,
nobody actually gave a shit about environmentally friendly, conscious, whatever you call it. Nobody in the company cared about it.
So I was like, okay, well, what is the purpose? It's not going to be for cleaning the air of the person's place, And I said, is it providing anything more than a plastic plant to look at?
Like a visual, yeah.
And when I questioned it, I was pulled aside in a separate chat, and I was told that I was belittling their ideas and not being open-minded. And when I retorted with what we knew to be true about what customers actually wanted and saying, this isn't something that they've indicated that they want, I was just being harsh and mean. And I was like, okay. I was also then told, and in that same conversation, that plastic plant was the CEO testing that person to see if they could come up with a reasonable product plan.
What? And could they?
It's so duplicitous.
Well, it was a culture of duplicity there. I mean, just the way that you were fired and then the COO immediately came to me and started like divulging shit. That's like duplicitous right there. But wait, so I need to know, was a plastic plant ever made?
I don't know.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was.
Well, we don't know yet. Maybe it comes out this year. Who knows?
Count me out for buying a fucking plastic plant.
I'm like, who's buying a plastic plant?
Well, I think that was the issue, is that there was no form of communication that was done, in a fluid sort of open manner. It was like, I was also not afraid to speak my mind or contradict someone, because I rested assured in my ability, my experience, and my overall knowledge. And I think it was tough for me because I was reporting to people or contradicting people who never had a real job before this now executive level job that they now have. And I worked up from the bottom to the top. Like, I went through it. I did not come from family members who got me into the industry. Like, I really am someone who started at the bottom, like Drake said. So apparently when I would be like, why are we doing that? It would come across as condescending, bitchy, rude. I would often make people in my team cry just because I'm saying I would say no, well, we're not doing that. We have to table that and do it another time. We don't have the time. And I was told that I needed to be kinder. And so maybe my emails were, needed to be fluffed, so to speak. And also, my feeling, again, we already talked about it, emails and messages in a workplace are simply to disseminate information. That's my feeling. And I just feel like it ended up creating a culture for me where I was always walking on eggshells. And I think ultimately you were too, Nicola, but you just didn't realize it because you were probably so overworked and under-rested that you were just like, this is normal.
But also the condescension in, I know we come back to communication a little bit later, but the condescension in the communication from the COO was diabolical. They
she would literally go around me. Ugh. And I was like, if you want to do my job and have my job, why did you hire me? Do it if you think you can do it better than me,
do it. Go
ahead. She can't, because if she could have, why would you have needed me? And when I expressed that to the COO, I was told, well, we never want her to shut down. And I just saw her shut down with you. And I was like, what? It just like none of it made any sense. I was always confused and I was always walking on eggshells. Always. Yeah. All right.
Okay,
So
well,
the next one.
is gossip.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We've already touched on that.
We've touched on this a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Employees will often complain to their peers rather than solve an issue through proper channels. Many people have come to believe this kind of office gossip is in a work environment, but it isn't. Gossip is what happens when team members are not talking with each other directly about issues or elevating concerns and having them addressed. When people don't feel seen and heard, their dissatisfaction leaks out in complaints to their colleagues.
And I was guilty of this. I was so unhappy that I would start talking shit about the CEO to my direct reports, and that's not okay.
Well, you know what? That's a really good opportunity for improvement. You now have seen yourself do that in a bad situation, and now you can look back and reflect and say that's something
I like that's my red flag. Like when I'm gossiping about people who are technically I report to, I need to peace out.
Yeah,
like like because I shouldn't be in a situation where I feel that comfortable. It's hard though in a place of toxicity. It's boundaries, man. They're so difficult, and especially because I also think that being remote really did us a disservice.
Sure.
Really did. But I feel like also you and I ended up getting fired because of gossip, just straight up. Yeah,
for sure. You know, like I think the other thing as well was, you know, on multiple occasions, there were screenshots sent to me, like gossipy screenshots sent to me. Like things, and then, you know, we would have these all hands on deck meeting, and then my team would get together, you know, for a debrief essentially, and it would just turn into a venting session because everybody was so displeased with how the system was working, and not gossiping specifically about people, but kind of bitching about the system and the fundamentals of how the system wasn't working.
Yeah. All right. So the next one, I mean, I feel like we could also say like, let's break up. Stories from shit shows of workplaces, like, because really it was a shit show. Anyway,
multiple levels, but only once I left did I realize what a shit show it actually was.
Right, and I think that's a great learning experience for you. And for me, my learning experience was, I'm calling myself on the things that I also fell into. And, you know, it's easy to kind of be like, just saying one or two things might not be the worst, or you're so frustrated that you speak about something.
Yeah.
But really, like, as a leader, you can't do that.
No.
Yeah. And also, like, so the next one, number 5, and I was about to talk about this without pointing it out, but number 5 we have here is troubling behaviors or body language. So body language indicates fear. Do people smile, laugh, engage informally? Do people ask questions for clarification? Do they challenge decisions? Any of these and other small behaviors can all be signals of a toxic environment. How can we ferret this out? And this is my favorite part: when many people continue to work remotely. So that, I think, really did the whole company a disservice, because we were all remote. And so if you were speaking to me like on the phone and I was like, oh my God, Nicola, you're killing me right now, you would get the context. You would be like, you're joking, I get it. And for me, I write messages and I email exactly how I speak. So there were times where I'd be like, oh my God, so-and-so, you're killing me. And it was used against me if they had known me, or if it had been done via, like, you know, a video chat or a call, you know, they would have known I was joking, but it was then used against me. So I think just being remote was a complete disservice for everyone.
I think, you know, as well, like, you've got that troubling kind of behaviors, and, you know, you were cut off from speaking directly with the CEO.
Yeah, because I made her shut down. Grow a pair.
But regardless, in this particular instance, the CEO always had the last say, even if it went against good business practice, which
Absolutely.
would ultimately impact other areas of the organization. And that was, for me, that was infuriating.
It was. And often the CEO would forget conveniently. And it was always like how she forgot about your recording that she asked for you to do it. Very convenient. For me, a big red flag here was the CEO and the COO never said thank you, never acknowledged good work. I was never told thank you. I was never told like, hey, you did a good job with that. You know, everything I did was always questioned. Did they ever say thank you to you?
Yeah, because I had some big hitting milestones, right? Yours
Yeah.
were a slow burn, whereas
Yeah.
mine were always quick, big hitting milestones. So it was easier to get that validation because of
Yeah.
we hit this target that we had set.
Right. I mean, that's true. And I think my stuff, it's like I think they were scared of me. Honestly, I think there was a level of being scared because I like was going to come in and like fuck it up in a good way. And they didn't fully trust me. It needed that, but they didn't fully trust me and they weren't willing to fully let go of the reins. So there was that. And they were wasting money all over the place. And if I would say like, hey, I can't in good conscience let you guys air this ginormous amount of items in that are super heavy, they would pitch a fit. And I'd be like, well, this is why we need to follow a retail calendar, a marketing calendar, and an import calendar. And they didn't even realize that there was such a thing. Yeah. Also, I remember asking a budget, like my spend budget for certain projects.
And I deep dove into that budget stuff. So I could give you at least a ballpark.
And like the way that they had us do our budgets, it was like, tell us how much you spent like last month and then how much you think you're going to spend. I'm like, first of all, why aren't we using like the most like simplest accounting like QuickBooks, and that way you just go right in and you see it, you run a report, there's no guessing, you see what you're actually spending. I mean, it was just, I remember I had to tell them the difference between costs of goods sold and cost of goods. They were calling everything cost of goods sold. So reserved team members, pay attention to non-expressive team members. One very frequent symptom that you can observe when you experience a toxic environment is a prolonged period of silence. Healthy teams express themselves, they argue, they talk, they question, they challenge, and they participate. If none of these things are happening, there's a big alert of a toxic environment. I don't know. For me, I had team members that I wouldn't even know what they looked like direct reports, technically, that never put their camera on during team meetings, barely spoke. I would not know who they were if I walked past them. I had team members who actively got upset when I would pose a question to them and then would publicly scold me, like to my team on Slack. It was really bad. And I think I mentioned it earlier, I would say like, we got to move fast. And it was only going to end up helping my team in the future. I was like, yes, it's going to suck right now. I completely get it. We just got to all come together. They always push back on it. And that would be fine if I was asking for like the world, but
we're just asking for the basics.
I mean, especially the art department, you would think they were making like brand new like fabrics, literally they were making like a little tiny logo that was like this big, that never really differentiated that much from the one that was done before.
Okay, number 7, no trust between colleagues. Be on the lookout for the absence of trust between employees. This can translate into disrespect between team members, dysfunctional work, lack of commitment to achieve shared goals. In a high trust culture, employees are comfortable with being vulnerable with one another, asking for help when needed, and not concealing their weaknesses, and providing constructive feedback that helps the team succeed. There was so much forced vulnerability, and when forced into being vulnerable, people would then use that as an opportunity to break trust. And this is kind of the point at which I'm going to introduce how I got the recording. I was originally brought on, I was focusing in on one area, but as I kept diving into one area, I noticed there were gaps in other areas that were having, business experience. I thought, okay, well, this is an opportunity for us to fill these gaps. It's really easy. There were two managers that could not get along. They could not
They
speak.
both sucked in their own way.
They
I mean,
both
they were
sucked
nice
in their-
people,
They were
but
lovely people separately, but the minute you put them together, they just had very different communication styles. And one would think one was being condescending, and then the other one was thinking they were being condescending, and this one's being a bitch.
wait, is that a theme here? Condescension? I feel like it is. I feel like this company is afraid of real feelings.
Well, we'll get into toxic positivity later, but so they had this misunderstanding for months. So the CEO approached me and said, are you able to come up with a way to solve this? And I was like, well, I'll look into it. So one of these two managers had hired me. So I had like a level of trust with the hiring manager and started going into these interviews with the managers and their teams to try and establish where the miscommunication was coming from, because it was significant. It was making the teams essentially just loathe each other. And literally, it just boiled down to different communication styles. Super simple. So when I was speaking with them individually, I would take notes, I would listen, I tried to understand kind of the intricacies. And at one point in one conversation, the conversation went on for 2 hours. And it was me,
Why?
asking open-ended questions like, tell me about your most challenging experience. Tell me what you struggle most with communication-wise. And because it went on for so long, I recorded the conversation because I was like, oh, I can come back to this later and take notes. What I didn't understand at the time, so I had told the hiring manager that I'd recorded the conversation. And very quickly, I worked out that the hiring manager was really only using this opportunity to essentially fire this other manager. They wanted to get enough information to say that this person wasn't good at their job, which they weren't, we know, but not a big issue at this point. I then went to the CEO and said, look, I have an inkling that this is what's happening. I am seeing with my eyeballs and my experience that this manager who hired me wants to get rid of the other manager and is using me as
A pawn.
Well, not even a pawn, but like to spotlight the issues in the team. So, the CEO absolutely knew that this recording had taken place. I deleted it like not long after. That's why I say there's no one that could have had this recording, because it was the one and only recording I ever did. And I wasn't even officially part of the team yet. I was just this contractor coming in and doing these small odd jobs. Anyway, so the other manager didn't get along and wanted the other one demoted or fired. So I let the CEO know and was told to just let it play out, because again, they didn't want to step on anyone's toes or make anyone upset. And the CEO hated confrontation and difficult conversations. So I just let it go. And it was really sad that 3 years later, this conversation came up to get rid of me.
It is sad.
It's really difficult to believe, to be honest. It's
also, like, I feel like if you had mentioned that to the CEO or COO or whatever, they should have been like, oh, that's illegal in the state, like for here, like you need to delete that immediately.
Yeah.
Like, if I was the CEO of that company, I would be like, ask you why you did that, and then say like, okay, just so you know, like you're obviously not American, so since we're based in America, these are the rules we abide by, and that's actually illegal in that state. So please delete it immediately. Like,
for sure. And would there have been a problem with that conversation?
No. Yeah, the CEO was very not willing to have difficult conversations, and in my position, I think there was no trust. First of all, my team did not trust me because of what you said in the beginning. There was no actual real change management. It wasn't announced in a way that made people understand. And my part to play in that was that I trusted them and respected them enough to think that we were actually a team, but we weren't.
No.
We weren't. And they, they were the first ones to throw me under the bus.
For sure. But you also had a really passive aggressive team, like people on your team.
Oh
were
my
really
God. Yeah.
aggressive, and it was so gross. Like I would
Mhm.
call it out, and it wasn't even my team, and I would call it out regularly to the COO saying, hey, this passive aggressive shit shouldn't be flying.
Right. And in the beginning, when I first came in, the same person that you're talking about was really rude to me, and yet told me that I was condescending, and I didn't, but ultimately it was just, there was no change management. So it was like she felt like she was being demoted when that wasn't the case at all. Like, so she had it in for me from the beginning.
Oh, for sure.
Like from the beginning. It was just a complete shit show. Let's talk about number 8, which is a lack of confidence in leadership. So gossip can be the death knell to an unsuspecting company. It destroys faith in management and demolishes trust in other colleagues. It also undermines the confidence of the organization, drives a wedge between team members, and creates a toxic environment. Gossip is bad. Louder for the people in the back. Gossip is bad, and every leader should be keenly aware of it. Leaders must address the source and solve the underlying problem that it stems from. How can you do that when you're the CEO and CEO are gossiping to people underneath them?
I know, like it starts from the top, right? The fish rots from the head. I think this was really clear, and some, serious issues with leadership. The CEO, while I'm sure had good intentions for the organization, would make, rash decisions without the consultation of any other of the leadership team, or to avoid confrontation, hand everything over to someone else. And more than once, they would reach out to me to fix something because they didn't have the confidence in the other managers to get it done. And for me, and I don't know if you had the same issue, but it was definitely an issue for me that the CEO was often just up or down on a whim. So in those up times, they would want everything reported, new development, micromanagement, pushing weird ideas, go, 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 go. And I would have to drop everything to make sure that the CEO was being pandered to, which means I couldn't work on my business as usual. And that was really frustrating. With these really whimsical ideas or like really bizarre analytics that they were looking for that had no relevance to like our long-term planning. And if I said no or push back, they would keep going to each manager until someone would say yes.
It's so ridiculous, because at the end of the day, I agree with you wholeheartedly. There was a lot of mind changing, not conveniently forgetting, just a lot of like weird, unprofessional things. And, I couldn't, it made me walk on eggshells, because I'd be like, well, if I say we can't do this because there's clearly not enough time, I'm going to get in trouble for this. And I feel like the executive team members, so the COO and the CEO, their mental health was most important, and like, fuck everyone else. Like, for instance, when the COO told me, I saw the CEO shut down and we never want that to happen. It's like, how about you actually learn how to run a fucking business and not say, at one point in a business meeting, she actually said, I don't care if this is a monetary loss.
I remember.
I said, I don't think we're ready. I don't think we're ready to do X, Y, and Z. And the response from the COO was, it's okay if it's a total loss. I'm okay with that. And I'm like, what, in what business plan, business model does that actually, is that okay? It is never okay. You want to plan something out. You want to be thorough with it. You want to make sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed. Because at best, you want to break even. You don't want to go into something saying, I'm okay if it's a total loss.
Inflexible communication. Ugh. For any team to thrive, open communication is key. Leaders must avoid being selective communicators. It's unrealistic expectation for leaders to communicate one way and expect employees to adapt their style. Instead, use adaptable and diverse communication platforms to accommodate how employees address you, either verbally or in writing, in an effort to seamlessly connect with them. I would say that for this organization, communication was interesting at best. In any email, any messages, you had to ensure your email was filled with fluff and kindness. You couldn't ever get to the point or discuss issues at hand. It was like this is something that really irked me. In the all hands on deck meeting, like everybody joined this meeting from all over the business. The COO would talk to us like we were school kids. And, oh my God, like, don't forget to update your emails.
I mean, I was constantly micromanaged.
It's bizarre.
Because like it would be like we'd have the meeting that all of the like team leaders, like everyone who was like basically executive management, like myself, yourself, there would be that meeting that would be followed up by another meeting that would be followed up by a third meeting. And that's too much micromanaging. And I think the communication here is the root of this toxic workplace that you and I met at. Because like you've already mentioned, like the CEO was unwilling to have difficult conversations. Experience was lacking. For me, the level of micromanagement was like unreal. And in my case, and I think also yours, like it was not needed. Like together we have over like 30 years of experience. And I felt I was micromanaged the most because I wasn't trusted the most. And I had to be on every meeting. I couldn't miss anything. And it was just like, I don't know. And I feel like that was sort of almost a tell. Like, I feel like the CEO and the COO felt threatened because it was clear they didn't know what they were doing. And by people like you and me shining a light on the issues that they were having actually, and like giving real-time solutions, made them feel uncomfortable.
Like you've mentioned to me, like the situations where the COO would, or the CEO would even talk about things that were totally inappropriate because we were a family and everybody was so close.
Yeah, I remember them mentioning something about their like son's genitalia that really was shocking. Like it was not anything like overtly sexual. It was like more like a medical thing, but it's like, why would I need to know that about your like 6-year-old son's balls? Like I don't. And it wasn't funny. It wasn't cute. I was just kind of like, yeah, just real inappropriate shit.
Next one is disengaged employees.
Yeah. So, okay, that's number 10. Employee disengagement is a key sign of a cultural divide within the organization and should prompt leaders to reach out to team members. I also suggest scheduling weekly one-on-one meetings with more senior team members and monthly one-on-one meetings with more junior members. Spend time getting to know the individual personally and allow the conversation to naturally flow into business matters and any changes. Okay, we're going to get more into that because there was an element of an MLM to this whole company. It was not an MLM, let me be clear, but there was the feeling of...
There was the psychology of the MLM.
Yeah, and sort of like a pyramid scheme almost.
Yeah.
So for me, I became completely disengaged. I stopped talking at all. Like you weren't there for that, but I basically stopped talking at all executive level meetings because I just didn't want to be shot down or told I was being condescending or making people feel stupid. So I just said nothing. I was like, fuck it. Like, I'm just like, keep my head, keep myself below, like flying below the radar. So nobody has anything to say about me positively or negatively. Just put my head down, do the work. That's it.
See, now I was opposite. I was so suck it in. I was too suck it in to be disengaged. I knew if I showed any disengagement, I would be called out about it. And I just didn't want the drama. Like it was just too much drama. I think one of the things, and we go on to the next one, is there was no time to reflect. Team members aren't openly coaching one another or running regular retrospectives, postmortems, or after action reviews when things didn't work out as planned. A good team takes the time to reflect. If they're skipping reflection, you've got some toxicity to sniff out. So if Okay, for me, it was just one issue after another. There was never any time to do proactive work. It was just issue after issue after issue, solving, putting out files all the time. I would try and have debriefs with my team, and they would just essentially turn into frustration around, the system wasn't working, your and my teams barely got along because your team was very closed book about what they were creating, and we would need the information to be able to plan our stuff. And, those meetings were like held at 3 a.m. my time. So I was up from like 3 a.m. onwards. And then there were back-to-back meetings, regular tight deadlines, but not just tight deadlines. It was like, oh, I forgot that we'd ordered this product and now we need an entire marketing campaign for this product. And it's like, well, when do you want to launch it? Tuesday, and it's Monday. It's like, what? Okay.
I think there was just unrealistic expectations, especially when someone like you or myself with actual experience were working with a team that really wasn't ready to work at that level. Like it was like pulling teeth for me.
My team was good. I could rely on my team to get stuff done, and I knew that it was getting done, but they were, it kind of perpetuated, right? Like I was in go all the time environment, which resulted in them being in a go all the time environment. And I would hope that they would be able to take the time off that they needed. But if they were taking time off, I was picking up the slack. So there was zero availability for me to get BAU stuff.
Which goes back to like the CEO and COO, like changing their mind. Like I remember I said, okay, like let's do this. I mentioned how good it is to do reorders because it's simple. You don't have to worry about a sample. So I was told by the COO that we would be doing a reorder. And to me, a reorder is like you reorder like 5 SKUs, maybe. Like it's not like they had a deadline and I didn't get the order that they wanted to reorder way past the deadline from the COO. So we were already behind the ball. When I tell you there was over 110 SKUs, and then I was told that I like dropped the ball because we couldn't make the timing. Why is that my problem? Like
your lack of planning is not my chaos.
Right. But yet it was my problem because I said, yeah, a reorder shouldn't be that big of an issue. However, that was probably my fault. I should have said like, well, how many items do you plan to order? I should have said like, up to 10 items. If it's past 10 items, we're going to have an issue with timing.
Yeah. So
at this point, like the CEO decided to talk to the vendor and go around me. And I was so fucking pissed. But
that just creates a level of inconsistency that we don't need.
Right. And I was not given I wasn't given the time to provide a solution to the issue. The next thing I know, I'm being asked, well, why didn't I come up with solutions? I was like, nobody ever asked me. You said you were going to talk about it with the COO and get back to me. And then the next thing I know, you're going around me. I mean, it was insanity. So for me, the no time to reflect, I think was partially because they were following this type of like management system that you basically had to purchase, which should be a huge fucking red flag to begin with. Like, so if you weren't doing meetings in that way, which were often back to back, then led into a different meeting, then you had to have meetings with your team, and then you had to have meetings with the COO. It was just, first of all, I was always behind because the meetings were so many meetings. I couldn't even get my day-to-day work done. Like I would always be working later at night. I like barely saw my daughter. She was only like 2 at this time. I never had time to do shit. Like, anyway, so I think that this purchasing of the management system, was a big thing for me because if it wasn't done in that way, and if you weren't logging it in the system, like the actual computer system that they ended up purchasing, you were asked why. And it was like, so I got to take time out of my day-to-day shit to have this meeting that I don't think I need to actually have, and then make sure I'm using this like pre-arranged structure to the meeting. Like to me, a good manager could just be like, all right, here's what we need to talk about. Let's go, and it is the same system that makes that makes each company come up with these like core ideas, like ideas that represent the company. And, you know, I keep talking about them as the Dr. Seuss one-liners, and that's exactly what they were. But I think all of this leads straight into number 12, which is tension in the office. Like, even though we weren't sitting in an office, I was always fucking tense.
Always. Like, I was always stressed.
Yeah, I was always fucking stressed. Like, I mean, I had like a stress blister on my face.
20 kilograms, like what, 40 pounds? Because
like you're just sitting there just like being reactive to shit.
Literally never left the house.
Tension in the office. A silent office can often be a sign of a toxic workplace. Sometimes a quiet office is required. Honestly, I would love nothing more than a quiet office, but not all the time. If nobody is smiling or people are keeping their heads down and saying everything is fine with no real constructive feedback or comments, something is most likely off. You can just feel the tension and the elephant in the room, which both need to be addressed immediately.
Passive aggressive bullshit in Slack messages. Like, it was so blatantly obvious. I think
it was the one person on my team who got me fired.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sending you Slack messages and like putting a heart behind it when it was clearly
like saying something really toxic and then being like, I'm like, you know what? To quote my favorite friend Gina, it was problematic.
Yeah. And she would try to do that shit to me, and I'd be like,
Nah.
And like to me, there was always too many fucking words coming from this person. Like, she would send me videos of herself, like reviewing samples. And I'm like, I don't have time to open a fucking video, look at it through when we could just jump on a call for 5 minutes, fucking talk about it and be done. Because now I got to stop what I'm doing, watch this video, which I could really give a shit about. Because I don't think you know exactly what you're doing. You're like mediocre at best, but I'm going with it. This is what I've been given. Let me make it work. Speaks for itself. Like, I now run a company that does product development, and
I work with you. We're not these people that we were made out to be.
No, I think sometimes, like, for me, it was almost like, and I think for me, I might have come across towards the end for sure condescending, because I was just fucking over it. But part of the reason why I wanted to be there was because I was like, oh, these people can learn from me. But when you don't have an open mind, you can't learn shit about shit. So anyway, the elephant in the room for the tension here is everyone. We all had a part to play. I mean, I want to say it was mainly the COO and the CEO. So actually, maybe I think the elephant in the room here was the lack of experience across the board.
Cool, because you've got a lack of experience of having difficult conversations. You've got a lack of experience putting in boundaries, workplace boundaries, to prevent that gossipy bullshit. You've got that toxic positivity, which we cover off a little bit later. We've got, like, you know, this lack of confidence in your team members, or lack of trust in the team members.
They don't have experience.
The only thing you know is, because you don't have the experience, is to micromanage. You know, it's almost like a defense mechanism. So,
and then buy a system that tells you to micromanage even more.
Yeah, because it's really just an echo chamber. And there was one situation where a manager, instead of ordering 50 of one thing, they ordered 5,000.
How does that even happen? Did they just change their mind at the last minute? Because that wouldn't surprise me.
I don't know. They said that it was a vendor issue and the vendor misunderstood.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like,
well, I wouldn't be.
But okay, so the person that did this order, they were totally immune to this problem, but it ended up having to be my issue to fix and come up with a way to get rid of these 5,000 things.
And the product themselves sucked. They were not done well either.
No, and like, so I said that I got rid of a majority of the 5,000. I can't say I got rid of all 5,000, but I was able to get rid of a majority of them in a really cool way. People really were happy with it. But you know what? We come back to that. We were targeting people that were vulnerable.
And it's so highly exploitative, and it's disgusting.
It was really exploitative. And my entire marketing campaign was targeted to be exploitative.
And I remember having a conversation with the CEO, and this was, I think, one of the tip-offs when I started to feel really gross about working there is, and I quote, I don't make decisions based on principles. Okay, so you're telling me you're someone who doesn't have principles or morals. That's essentially, that was my takeaway.
Ew.
I was saying, like, we can't do X, Y, and Z because it's going to set a precedence. And then this vendor is going to expect this every single time.
Yeah.
And the fact that that then became, well, I don't make decisions based on principle.
That's
I was like,
a bizarre
oh,
thing to say.
but it's also not wise in a business sense. Like, okay, so if you're going to let this vendor get away with this, then they're going to continually think that they can. It was all someone's like made up idea, and there was nothing backed by science. There was nothing, it was, and you're targeting a demographic again that is already vulnerable, and that's how you're profiting. And at the end of the day, like, we would know that these products were shitty and they didn't work right, but we had no choice but to sell them anyway.
All right, we have non-verbal feedback. You can speak more about this than I could.
Okay, so look for nonverbal behavior to tell you what is really going on. Eye rolls, people not talking when you ask a sincere, open-ended questions, or the meeting after the meeting, are just a few of the danger sides. If people don't speak up in leadership when you think they should, then you might have a toxicity problem. Again, for me, it was so many meetings after the meeting, or having the meeting and then someone texting or slacking, messaging me on Slack about what was just said. Fear of speaking candidly.
What is publicly in meetings is different from what is shared privately between colleagues. This is a clear indicator of a low trust, toxic culture that is lacking in psychological safety. This is so true. So often the CEO would message me privately after a meeting and after something had unfolded and kind of debrief with me. And it was things that they couldn't say in the meeting and they felt like they could share with me. And that is just such, like, looking back, that is such a red flag. Like, if you're doing that, how many other people in the team are doing that?
I think there was a lot of, first of all, like, she should never be doing that. That's unless it's like an urgent business matter. If you can't say it to your executive team, then it shouldn't be said. For me, like, I got to the point where someone who was my direct report had bullied me so badly that I was afraid to talk to anyone on their team, even though they all ultimately directly reported to me. Hesitancy to ask challenging questions. Number 15, if people are not asking questions of their superiors, then you have perhaps unwittingly created an organization governed by fear. If your team is guided by fear, they will be hesitant to try anything new, and all creativity and progress will grind to a halt.
Always ask challenging questions. I like to know. I'm a curious George, right? And I like to find the gaps, and I like to improve, and I want to improve our delivery on things. And it's a way that you work out how you're going to do that. But this was always, in this organization, it was always met with, well, why do you need to ask that? Or just leave it will ruffle feathers.
And I also think it was, I was hesitant to say anything because I was walking on eggshells with the CEO and COO. But that was coupled with the other side where I had so much more experience and like real life, actual experience doing this type of job that then most of these people even were alive. I mean, I've been working in corporate America for 20 plus years. It was very difficult for me. And it wasn't that I didn't mind reporting to people. That's fine. But I want to learn from them.
Yeah.
Just like I want people under me to learn from me. And I was teaching them. And I don't think that that's necessarily great. So I would just end up like not saying anything again and just accepting that what they wanted was going to be their own mess to fix. But that's not really how it ended up. We all know that. So, yeah. But what I do know is that what they're doing right now, it's not sustainable. If they continue on the same path, I don't find it to be sustainable.
All right, uncertain work responsibilities and boundaries. Toxicity becomes possible when employees do not understand where each person's area of responsibility is.
Mhm.
Uncertain boundaries lead to chaos. You need to start with structuring by clearly and transparently defining areas of responsibility, policies, processes. Next is the internal culture. The owners and the entire management team themselves should be a model of ethical behavior for the team.
But I don't make decisions based on principle.
The lines of this particular workplace were so blurred across the board because of the family-like environment. It made it really difficult to make those lines clear. And often additional workload would just be added without much consultation because it was known that whoever that workload was given to, the work could get done. So even if it was outside of your wheelhouse, you would end up diving into something. And you know, my entire time there was essentially that. It was like, okay, well, I can look into that if you need me to, or okay, well, yep, sure, I can get that done.
If my department, which was product development, didn't have skills to do product development and came to you, that would be a problem, right? So, but for me, I felt like different departments were vying to do the same type of work. Like at one point there was 2 different brand guidelines floating around and I was like, what is going on here? And then we were also, like you mentioned, always put more and more. Okay, we're deciding like, so like the reorder I mentioned, instead of reordering 10, 15 SKUs, they reordered like 110, which is absolutely asinine. Basically, it was like we were constantly tasked to do more and more, but we never had the ability to do it properly due to timing. My refusal to waste a shit ton of money to air things in because their planning schedule was non-existent, and inferior workers. So it was no surprise to me that most of the items they made had issues. So I was always uncertain. Like, okay, like it was always like, I don't know what I'm going to walk into today because everything was like,
every day was
just like reactive.
Yeah. Every day was a fire to put out.
This is the longest podcast episode ever. I feel like this is like 3 episodes in one.
Okay, it kind of comes into kind of the last part of what we're talking about today, and it's the MLM vibe, right? And I know we've both done a bit of research around this because I think for the both of us, we really wanted to understand how we got sucked in to the toxic environment. And we absolutely, I think, agree on the fact that it was toxic positivity.
So,
well, that brings us kind of to the end. And, you know, we really want to thank you for joining us on part 1 and part 2 of our first episode.
And possibly part 3.
Possibly part 3.
We would love it if you could like and subscribe to our podcast. And side note, leaving a review also helps. And it lets everyone else know that we don't suck too bad.
It helps us create more because it shows that there's an interest in the topic and in toxic workplaces. You can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn, and this will also go up on YouTube as well. All right, so you're welcome to reach out to us on our LinkedIn page or our Instagram page over at Toxic Workplace Pod, and let's break up toxic workplace stories. If you would like to be interviewed, we welcome you to share your story because we are all about solidarity. And if you're listening today, it would be really cool if you could screenshot and share it to IG, and we would love to give you a shout out on an upcoming episode.